Good day, everybody. Psychedelic attorney Greg Lake here with my full-time buddy, partner in crime, Buddy Bear.
What it do? I'm Buddy Bear.
And we're here today to talk about a very recent study that has been published regarding the potential effectiveness of psilocybin to treat cocaine use disorder. Okay. And again, I said this is a very new study, pretty much 10 years in the making. I'm not saying that they were taking data or doing trials for a full 10 years, but this study, which was conducted, by the way, by Dr. Peter Hendricks at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and a handful of other distinguished psychedelic researchers.
Say, cuz I think Dr. Hendricks, OG of psychedelic research.
Now, that's right, buddy. Dr. Hendricks is an OG of the psychedelic research space. Thank you again for all your work, Dr. Hendricks. This is EntheoSK YouTube channel. We're glad you have you. This video is not intended to promote, advertise, support, or in any way encourage anyone to use any substance, really, in reality, but especially any illicit substances and especially cocaine. Okay. So with that being said, you know, let's talk about cocaine use disorder, right? Let's talk about cocaine. I mean, I'm sure most people who are watching this video might have either had an experience with cocaine or know someone who's had an experience or many with cocaine. As many people are always aware, I was in and out of the streets and in and out of addiction for over 30 years of my life. So obviously, cocaine is something that I've been familiar with for a very long time. I can say that I'm very fortunate that over my time, despite having used cocaine before, I never really became, at least what I would for sure consider addicted to cocaine. I mean, I can't lie. There was a lot of fun times, a lot of crazy times, a lot of bad times too. But most definitely, I was existing over my years, both on the streets and in treatment and in institutions, in and around some pretty hard cocaine addicts. God bless all of them. Just over my time, I've noticed that people who tend to just, and this is not to exceptionalize one way or method administration of cocaine over the other, it is definitely not intended for that. Just my personal observations on it have been that people who usually snort cocaine is like kind of the, apex or crux of how they use it. Not saying they don't get addicted. It seems, and this might be worse than the option, but a lot of times seem to be a bit more functional to the extent that they are addicted to cocaine. I know growing up, the people in and around my circles using cocaine, it was primarily powder cocaine used, snorted after drinking. Okay, which usually was every day, right? But usually came later in the evening after they had had some drinks. That's kind of the next move. As opposed to, and I've been dealing with crack cocaine addicts for a very long time. I mean, even when I was a kid, going to these drug houses, used to get in confrontations with crack cocaine addicts over money. Obviously, they wanted to take mine. But and again, that's not to look down on crack cocaine addicts at all. It is also cocaine, right? But just over my time, I have noticed, and that's anecdotally and just witnessing people, have noticed that free-base forms of cocaine, intravenous cocaine, tend to be more addictive for people. And again, that's just my observation. And not saying one way is better. None of it's good, right? None of it's good for you. But just wanted to lay out my observations on cocaine use disorder. Obviously, the problem with cocaine use disorder within the United States has been kind of an ongoing thing, right? Starting in the mid to late 70s, cocaine use came on the rise, culminating with the crack epidemic starting in the late 80s. I want to believe hardcore.
Say, G, did the CIA create the crack epidemic?
Well, buddy, that question on the CIA and the crack epidemic, that's just going to have to be for another episode. How about that? Maybe we address it on G Money Buddy Bear, but we're going to put that to the side. But, I'm not saying you're tinfoil hat with that one necessarily, buddy. But anyways, yeah. So obviously, crack cocaine use, addiction disorder culminated, in the crack epidemic more or less. And based upon some of just preliminary reading I was doing today, it seems to have maybe towards the mid 90s kind of leveled off a little bit, meaning the sting from the crack cocaine epidemic kind of leveled out, but still an issue today, right? Cocaine addiction use is still theoretically an issue today, in the sense that it is, in a sense, prevalent. I saw a figure that said that pretty much 1 million people or so in the United States are directly affected negatively by cocaine use disorder. So read into that what you want. But I guess tying up all the loose ends here, cocaine use disorder is something that most definitely could be addressed better by our system generally, but particularly in the medical field, because to date there really has been no specific or go to pharmacological remedy or aid for cocaine use disorder. Okay, so hence now we have this study. Now I don't know if that's exactly why Dr. Hendricks did it. He looked at all the addictions and said, well, we don't have any kind of pharmacological agent to help this. Let's do this. But obviously, I know that that was something that was thought about and likely discussed in preparation doing this research. The study itself, okay, so this included, I think they picked 40 participants, but for one reason or another, it came out to be 36 total, once it all came out in the wash. This study was 4x blinded, fourfold blinded. I'm not going to get into explaining that here, other than pretty good measures taken against biases there. It was randomized. One good thing, as Buddy Bear has noted previously, is that it primarily consisted of poor and people from underserved minority communities, particularly African Americans.
Say, cuz Dr. Hendricks doing the Lord's work, including underserved communities in his research.
As Buddy has recognized, yes, Dr. Hendricks, thank you, is doing the Lord's work doing this. And I'll talk about that more in just one second. Many of these people had decades of suffering from cocaine use disorder. Okay. And again, like I said, mostly low income people. And the reason why this is significant, as Buddy has pointed out, is that and it's been discussed and brought up in other papers and research, is that, for whatever reason, normally these other psychedelic studies end up with mostly white, middle class, upper echelon participants. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent. It's just, it is what it is. So, for us here in this camp, Buddy Bear included, we are, very happy to hear that there was a study that seems to, in a sense, maybe intentionally tried to include people who haven't been included as much in these other studies. And, to the extent that we want our government approved and backed studies to be inclusive of America as a society, then obviously this transition or move towards including these underserved and otherwise underincluded, especially within the psychedelic research, demographics, I think, is always a good move that should be praised. And, and I don't know if I said this earlier, we are friends with Dr. Hendricks. We know Dr. Hendricks. We love him. He's an awesome dude. And the fact that he did something like this doesn't surprise me at all. He really does care about addicts, and that's like his main area of study, with psychedelics just coming in kind of afterwards, which he specializes in now. But it's always been kind of primarily aimed at addiction, his psychological psychiatric work. So thank you, Dr. Hendricks. um, and obviously this consists, out of the 36 people, you had a group that took psilocybin, did the psilocybin treatment, and then a placebo group. Okay. This whole study included 4 to 5 like pre-dosing or pre-dosing session, fake dosing session, psychotherapy sessions, obviously with a qualified practitioner. Obviously, the psilocybin group received 1 dose of psilocybin, and again, this whole thing just included 1 dose in one session. Okay, but those who did take it took the usual 25 milligrams per 70 kilogram body weight, with the obviously the control group, the placebo group, receiving, I think, diphenamine or something of that nature. I forget what it was, but it obviously just placebo. Excuse me for not having it written down here. I do apologize. Um, and then after these sessions, they received 5 post-study sessions. So they also received some psychotherapy after the initial dosing session. Well, they had the initial sessions, then the dosing sessions, then a few what we would call really integration sessions within the larger entheogenic psychedelic community, for those who are familiar. And obviously, these were all given in an appropriate set and setting. Talking about the psilocybin dose, obviously, set and setting very important to how the experience is going to come out. So, obviously, the normal parameters were observed. I'm not going to go into detail on those, although we will probably will in later episodes. Okay. So what were the results? Pretty, in my opinion, significant. Okay. Obviously, this was only a study of 36 people, so I do hope that this is expanded out. But let's just talk about specifics. What it showed is that overall, the psilocybin participants had significantly more abstinent days than the control group. Okay. Or the placebo group. Now, apparently 30% of the psilocybin group, okay, achieved complete abstinence through 180 days, which I'll just say, in my experience, is one hell of a feat for someone who's not like who's a for sure cocaine addict and not in jail or some other institution, just working on more or less an outpatient basis. Pretty incredible. So commend to all those people who are able to do that. God bless you, man. It's good work. And then, unfortunately, the placebo group had 0% full abstinence. I'm assuming that number really is relating to the 180 days. And so there you go. So there does seem to be at least some indication that psilocybin can help these psilocybin sessions with, again, supportive therapy and other things going on in and around the session. I don't want to discount that. But it does seem, though, I mean, if we consider that the difference, even though all those supportive elements were given to the placebo group, they didn't have 30% abstinence. I think we can, even with a small sample size, at least begin to think in the direction that psilocybin might have a dramatic, or at least a significant effect, significant enough to keep going and continuing to study this. And then overall, the researchers concluded that the psilocybin group uh, had just basically a dramatically reduced relapse risk. Their risk of relapse, as measured by the professionals over time, they concluded dramatically reduced. So, another significant finding, in my opinion, based on that. So again, and I'm just to wrap up here, just covering, want to make sure we point out some of the limitations here, with obviously the study size being the first one. I do want to point out that obviously there have been other previous studies done with psilocybin, even going back to the 60s. So, and we'll cover that for sure in another episode, is that way back in the 50s and 60s, they had been using LSD and psilocybin to treat alcoholics with quite a bit of success. So I want to go back and dig those numbers up. But even modern times, there's been, I know, a nicotine, maybe an alcoholism one modern time, but definitely nicotine, and there was one other addictive behavior, maybe bulimia or anorexia. There's been a few studies, modern time, done on different addictions related to psilocybin therapy. So, and again, I would consider, just my opinion, I would consider this one of the major ones just because of the addictiveness of cocaine for a lot of people. So to see that this has had a dramatic effect when there are no other pharmacological alternatives at this point, I think is significant in the larger context of addiction treatment and psychedelics research. Um, so again, I hope for additional studies. Um, I certainly think that this, even these, in a sense, preliminary results in the study are significant. I've always been a supporter, obviously, of Dr. Hendricks' work. This definitely doesn't change anything. For those who feel called, please do whatever you can to support his work too. This is good stuff, and I hope it continues. And so, hats off, kudos to Dr. Hendricks, Dr. Johnson, and all the other well qualified researchers who participated in this study. Man, it's a lot of long, hard work, but I think we're getting somewhere with that. Again, can't wait to see where this goes. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you ever personally struggled with this, or had a loved one or someone close to you struggle with it? What are your thoughts generally if you've ever experienced psilocybin? I mean, do you get the impetus from those experiences, or hearing from others that this makes sense to you? Let me know, because I've had, even a current client of mine has expressed that psilocybin helped him overcome cocaine addiction. So I've seen some anecdotal real life stories myself, heard of them, um, jiving with this research. So anyway, again, psychedelic attorney Greg Lake here, buddy. Bear with me. We're signing off. God bless, much love, and we'll have another episode coming this week. See y'all.